HOA sent 6 cop cars to seize my 100-year-old family farm. I started the clock and watched them panic. 6 police SUVs rolled down my dirt road like I was some kind of criminal. My sheep stopped grazing. My barn stood quiet. And the HOA president stepped out smiling like she already owned my land. But she didn't know something. I wasn't scared. I was waiting. Because the moment those cop cars crossed my fence line, the timer started ticking. And they had no idea what that meant. Welcome to HOA Stories. I'm Daniel. I live just outside a quiet American town where land still means something. My family built this farm 100 years ago. And I work it every single day. If you really hate corrupt HOAs, if you believe homeowners should fight back, hit subscribe right now. Comment "Go HOA" if you stand against HOA power trips. And share this with anyone who's ever dealt with HOA nonsense. Now let me tell you what really happened that day. The timer was already running in my head. 6 cop cars sat outside my farm gate like I was hiding something illegal. Dust still floated in the air from when they rolled in. My sheep were restless. Even my old barn felt tense. The HOA president stepped out of the front SUV like she was stepping onto a movie set. High heels on gravel. Blonde hair perfect. Smile sharp enough to cut steel. She looked at my land like it already belonged to her. I leaned on my gate, calm, breathing slow. Because panic is what they wanted. And I wasn't giving them that. This farm isn't just dirt and fences. It's 100 years of sweat. My great-grandfather bought this land when there was nothing here but trees and wild grass. My grandfather built that red barn with his bare hands. My dad planted the first apple trees near the creek. And me. I kept it running when the town around us turned into cookie-cutter houses and HOA rulebooks. That's how this mess started. 5 years ago, a developer bought the land across from my south field. Within months, a shiny neighborhood popped up. Perfect lawns. Identical mailboxes. Tiny trees tied to sticks like they needed supervision. And of course, an HOA. At first, they ignored me. I wasn't inside their little map lines. But rich suburban folks hate unpredictability. And nothing screams unpredictable like a working farm next door. They didn't like my tractor noise. Didn't like the smell of manure when the wind shifted. Didn't like that my grass wasn't trimmed to exactly 3 inches. One day I got a letter. Not a friendly one. A certified envelope with bold letters. Violation notice. I laughed when I opened it. They claimed my barn violated community aesthetic standards. My barn is older than their entire subdivision. They demanded I repaint it to match their approved color palette. Soft beige. Can you imagine? Soft beige on a 100-year-old barn. I ignored it. Then came another letter. Then fines. $200. $500. $1000. They said my property technically fell into a shared visual impact zone. That's when I knew they were serious. Petty. But serious. I hired a lawyer. Turns out, I wasn't part of their HOA. Never signed anything. Never agreed to their rules. But here's the trick. The developer who built their neighborhood also bought an old access easement decades ago. A dusty legal detail buried in county records. That easement crossed one corner of my land. Just a strip near the creek. Small. But enough for them to claim shared jurisdiction influence. Slimy move. But legal language can twist like barbed wire. I pushed back. Filed paperwork. Showed up at their HOA meetings just to watch them squirm. That's when I first saw her. Melissa Carter. HOA president. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She smiled. That calm suburban smile. The kind that hides lawsuits behind lip gloss. She'd say things like, "We just want harmony in the community, Daniel." Harmony. While sending me fines. Then things escalated. They claimed my livestock fencing violated a visual obstruction clause. It's a farm. Fences are kind of the point. Then came the threat. They voted to pursue legal seizure for unpaid assessed damages. Damages. Because my barn color offended their cul-de-sac. I thought it was a bluff. Until this morning. 6 cop cars. 6. That wasn't bluff energy. That was intimidation. The officers stood awkwardly near their vehicles. Most of them looked uncomfortable. Like they knew this was nonsense. Melissa walked toward my gate with a folder tucked under her arm. 2 HOA board members followed behind her like backup dancers. She stopped a few feet away from me. Close enough to see my reflection in her sunglasses. "Daniel," she said softly. "We're here to execute a court-backed property compliance order." Big words. Fancy tone. Still nonsense. I didn't move. Didn't unlock the gate. Just looked past her at the cop cars. 6 vehicles seems dramatic, I said. Her smile tightened. "You left us no choice." I almost laughed. They wanted drama. They wanted the neighborhood watching. And oh, they were watching. Across the field, near the new white fences, I could see phones raised. Recording. Probably already uploading to Facebook groups. Farm owner finally faces justice. That's what they expected. But what they didn't know was that I had spent the last 3 months preparing. See, when they filed that seizure motion, I filed something too. Quietly. Through a county agricultural protection statute older than their entire HOA board combined. My farm qualifies as protected historic agricultural land. Which means forced compliance seizures require state-level review. Not just HOA court stamps. And state-level review takes time. A lot of time. Unless someone makes a procedural mistake. Which they did. I pulled my phone out slowly. Tapped the screen. Started a visible timer. Melissa frowned. "What are you doing?" "Just tracking something," I said calmly. One of the officers shifted his weight. He looked at Melissa. Then at me. Like he wanted this over with. She cleared her throat. "Unlock the gate, Daniel." But I didn't. Because I knew something she didn't. And the clock on my screen kept ticking. See, when you trigger an agricultural protection review improperly, every minute counts. And every minute they stood here attempting enforcement. They were stacking liability. Against themselves. Against the HOA. Against every board member who voted yes. The wind picked up slightly. Sheep bleated behind me. The waterfall near the cliff kept roaring like it always has. Unbothered. Unlike the people in front of me. Melissa's smile was fading now. And I could see it. The first crack in her confidence. She expected fear. She expected anger. But calm. Calm makes people nervous. One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, do we have state confirmation on this order?" That question hit different. Melissa blinked. Just once. And that's when I knew. The timer mattered more than they realized. I looked up at her. Still relaxed. Still leaning on my gate. And I asked quietly. "You sure you want to keep standing here? Because once this clock hits 0, things change. And trust me, they weren't ready for what happens next. So tell me something. If 6 cop cars pulled up to your family's 100-year-old home over a paint color and a fence, would you panic? Or would you let the clock run? Drop your answer below. The officer's question hung in the air like thick smoke. "Ma'am, do we have state confirmation on this order?" Melissa didn't answer right away. That tiny pause. That half-second delay. It told me everything. She turned slightly, just enough to block the officer's view of her face. "We have a signed compliance enforcement authorization," she said calmly. But calm can crack. And hers just did. I looked down at my phone. The timer kept ticking. 02:13. 02:14. 02:15. Slow, steady. Like a heartbeat. The wind pushed against my barn doors. They creaked softly. I've heard that sound my whole life. But today it felt louder. Like the farm itself was watching. One of the other officers walked closer to the lead cop. Low voice. "You sure this isn't civil?" Civil. That word matters. Because cops don't like getting dragged into civil property disputes. Especially ones tied to agricultural protection law. Melissa's heels shifted on the gravel. Crunch, crunch. "Daniel," she said, voice a little tighter now. "Unlock the gate. This doesn't need to get ugly." Ugly. Like 6 cop cars on a dirt road wasn't already a show. I tilted my head slightly. It already is ugly. Across the field. I could see neighbors from the subdivision standing near their white vinyl fences. Watching. Phones raised. Some of them looked excited. Like this was entertainment. Others looked nervous. Because deep down, they knew. If the HOA could do this to me, they could do it to anyone. The lead officer stepped forward again. "Sir, are you refusing to comply with a court order?" Good question. Very good question. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't act tough. Just calm. "Officer, respectfully, that order requires state agricultural review before enforcement. That review hasn't happened." He looked at Melissa. Melissa kept her smile glued on. But sweat was forming near her temple. "You're misinformed," she said quickly. No hesitation that time. Too quick. I raised my phone slightly so she could see the screen. Timer now at 03:42. Her eyes flicked down to it. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that once this hits 5 minutes of active enforcement without state clearance." I paused. Let it breathe. The liability shifts. The word liability makes people rethink their life choices. One of the HOA board members behind her whispered something. Probably asking if she was sure. Melissa didn't look back. Control freaks never do. But I saw it. That flicker. The moment she realized she might not fully understand the legal machine she started. The lead officer pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, can we confirm state agricultural clearance on case number?" Melissa stepped in fast. "That won't be necessary." Too fast. Now all the officers were looking at her. And when cops look at you like that, you've lost control of the scene. I stayed quiet. That's the trick. You don't win by shouting. You win by letting silence expose people. The wind shifted again. Carrying the smell of hay and soil. Normal farm smell. But to suburban noses. Probably offensive. Melissa exhaled sharply. "We're not here to debate technicalities," she snapped. There it was. The mask slipping. "We're here to enforce compliance." I pushed off the gate slowly. Stood upright now. Not aggressive. Just present. This land was protected under the Historic Agricultural Preservation Act in 1978, I said calmly. My lawyer filed activation notice 3 months ago when you submitted your seizure motion. The officer holding the radio looked confused. "Ma'am, if that's active." Melissa cut him off again. It's being reviewed. Ah. Being reviewed. That means not approved. And definitely not enforceable yet. My timer hit 04:31. She saw it again. Her jaw tightened. I stepped closer to the gate. Still separated by steel bars. You really should have waited, I said quietly. Behind her. One of the HOA guys was already pulling out his phone. Probably texting their lawyer. Too late. Once you trigger premature enforcement on protected land, it's documented. It's recorded. And yes, I was recording too. Body cam style. Mounted near my porch. Capturing every second. Every word. Every badge number. The lead officer finally spoke firmly. Ma'am, without confirmed state clearance, this appears to be a civil dispute. Boom. Civil dispute. That's the phrase I needed. Melissa's face changed. That polished HOA president looked cracked wide open. This is harassment, she snapped at me. Harassment. Funny word coming from someone who fined me for barn paint. My phone buzzed lightly. Message from my lawyer. 3 words. Review confirmed active. I didn't even need to reply. The timer hit 05:00. And I stopped it. Deliberately. Right in front of her. She noticed. Why did you stop it? She asked. Because now. It didn't matter anymore. The violation wasn't mine. It was theirs. The officer lowered his radio completely. Ma'am, we're clearing this scene. Just like that. 6 cop cars. All that noise. All that drama. Started to dissolve. Engines turning over. Gravel crunching again. One by one. They began pulling away. Melissa stood frozen for a moment. Watching her power drive off without her. I leaned back against my gate again. Calm as ever. You should have just left my barn alone, I said softly. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Because now she wasn't just facing embarrassment. She was facing exposure. And HOAs don't like exposure. They like quiet control. But today, the whole subdivision saw it. They saw the cops leave. They saw her standing there. Alone. The HOA board members were already walking back toward their cars. Distance is funny like that. People scatter when power fades. Melissa finally turned toward me again. Voice lower now. This isn't over. I smiled slightly. No, it's not. Because what she didn't realize was that I didn't just defend my farm today. I triggered something much bigger. A review. An audit. And once the state starts asking questions about HOA enforcement over protected land, they don't stop at one case. So here's what I'm wondering. If your HOA just tried to flex with 6 cop cars, and it backfired in front of the whole neighborhood, would you let it go? Or would you push even harder? What would you do next? Drop it in the comments. The last police SUV disappeared past the curve in my dirt road. And just like that, the show was over. Or at least that's what Melissa probably thought. She stood there for a few seconds longer. Like she was waiting for someone to yell cut and reset the scene. But real life doesn't reset. Real life remembers. She adjusted her blazer. Smoothed her hair. Trying to glue that perfect HOA president mask back together. You embarrassed yourself today, she said quietly. I almost laughed. No, I said. You did. Her jaw tightened. That smile was completely gone now. All that suburban polish replaced with something raw. Anger. Fear. Maybe both. The two board members were already inside their sedan. Engine running. Ready to disappear. Funny how fast backup fades when things go sideways. Melissa stepped closer to the gate. Lowered her voice. You think this is over because the cops left? I didn't answer right away. Just let the wind move between us. My sheep had gone back to grazing. They didn't care about HOAs. They cared about grass. Simple creatures. Wish people were that simple. You made a mistake, she said. You forced enforcement without state clearance, I replied calmly. That triggers automatic review. She blinked again. That word review was starting to haunt her. You filed something, she said slowly. It wasn't a question. It was realization. I nodded once. 3 months ago. Right after her board voted to escalate fines. I went digging. Not emotionally. Legally. County records. Historic land protections. Agricultural exemptions. Turns out. When my great-grandfather registered this farm in 1926, he locked in protections most people forgot even existed. And once activated, those protections don't just defend land. They expose overreach. Melissa took a step back. The gravel crunched again. Louder this time. You think the state cares about one old farm, she snapped. It's not about caring, I said. It's about procedure. Procedure is boring. But boring wins courtrooms. And HOAs hate boring. They like drama. Letters. Fines. Threats. Control. What they don't like is paperwork that fights back. Her phone buzzed. She checked it. And whatever she read made her face go pale. Just for a second. Then she locked it again. You'll regret this, she muttered. And she walked toward her car. Heels digging harder into the dirt now. Not graceful anymore. Just angry. I watched her drive off. Dust trailing behind her like a bad decision. The road went quiet again. Peaceful. But not calm. Because peace after a confrontation isn't peace. It's the build-up to round 2. I walked back toward my barn. Ran my hand along the old redwood. Still solid. Still standing. Unlike some egos I just witnessed. Inside the barn, I grabbed a ladder and checked the security camera mounted above the entrance. Recording perfectly. Audio clear. Every word captured. Especially that moment the officer said civil dispute. That clip alone was gold. I sent it straight to my lawyer. Then I did something Melissa never expected. I posted a short clip online. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just 30 seconds. 6 cop cars pulling away from a quiet farm. Captioned. HOA attempted enforcement on protected agricultural land. Police classify as civil dispute. That's it. No rant. No insults. Just facts. Within an hour, it started spreading. Local groups. County pages. Even a small farming rights forum picked it up. People don't like bullies. Especially when the bully wears a fake smile and uses police as props. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from neighbors I didn't even know. Some from inside the subdivision. One message stood out. A guy named Trevor. Lives 3 houses from Melissa. He wrote, "They've been fining us for stupid stuff for years. No one fights back." That hit different. Because this was never just about my barn. It was about power. And power doesn't shrink unless someone pushes it. The next morning, I got official notice. State Agricultural Review Board had acknowledged improper enforcement attempt. Formal inquiry opened. And here's the thing about formal inquiries. They request documents. Meeting minutes. Financial records. Legal justifications. Everything. HOAs survive on confidence. But audits strip confidence fast. Around noon, a black SUV rolled slowly down my dirt road again. Not police this time. County seal on the door. 2 officials stepped out. Clipboards in hand. Serious expressions. They weren't here for me. They were here because someone overstepped. And once the state smells overreach tied to protected land, they dig. I met them at the gate. Calm as always. Answered questions. Showed original land registration documents. Historic status confirmation. They nodded. Took notes. Professional. Efficient. One of them said something interesting before leaving. This isn't the first HOA complaint we've seen lately. That made me pause. Pattern. Patterns scare institutions. By sunset, word had spread through the subdivision like wildfire. Melissa had called an emergency board meeting. Closed session. No residents allowed. That alone tells you everything. Transparency disappears when panic sets in. Later that night, Trevor messaged me again. They're blaming you for everything. I smiled at that. Of course they were. Because when control slips, leaders look for someone to point at. But here's the part Melissa didn't see coming. I wasn't alone anymore. The clip kept spreading. Farmers. Property rights advocates. Even a small local news blogger reached out asking questions. And attention. Attention is the one thing HOAs can't regulate. So now I'm sitting here on my porch, looking out over land my family built with sweat. Listening to the quiet. But knowing the quiet won't last. Because once the State Review Board starts digging into HOA enforcement practices, they won't just ask about my farm. They'll ask about everything. Every fine. Every lien. Every threat letter sent over mailbox height and grass color. And when residents realize their board might have overstepped more than once, things get messy. Real messy. So let me ask you something. If you found out your HOA wasn't just petty, but legally reckless, would you stay quiet to keep the peace? Or would you push until the whole thing cracked open? What would you do? Tell me below. The emergency HOA meeting didn't stay quiet for long. Closed doors never do. Especially when fear starts leaking under them. Trevor texted me that night around 9:47 p.m. They're arguing. Like yelling arguing. I could almost picture it. Melissa at the head of the table. Board members sweating through their button-down shirts. Papers scattered. Voices rising. Blame flying. Because once an audit starts, loyalty disappears fast. The next morning, something strange happened. I didn't get a violation letter. No certified envelope. No warning. Silence. For the first time in 5 years. Silence from the HOA. That alone told me they were nervous. Bullies don't go quiet unless someone bigger walks into the room. And the state had just walked in. Around noon, I drove into town for feed supplies. And that's when I noticed the shift. People were looking at me differently. Not like I was the stubborn farm guy anymore. More like I was the guy who stood up. An older man near the grain store gave me a small nod. Didn't say anything. But that nod meant respect. Respect in small towns travels quietly. On the way back, I passed the entrance to the subdivision. Perfect white sign. Perfect trimmed bushes. But something felt off. Two residents were standing near the mailbox cluster, talking low. One of them glanced at my truck, then quickly looked away. Guilt, maybe. Or curiosity. By evening, Trevor called instead of texting. His voice sounded different. Lower. Cautious. They're scared, he said. Of what? I asked. Of what the state's going to find. Now that got my attention. He told me one of the board members had quietly admitted something during the meeting. Apparently, the HOA had been using enforcement threats for years without always verifying legal standing. Sometimes they counted on homeowners not knowing their rights. Sometimes they pushed fines hoping people would just pay to avoid stress. That's not just petty. That's calculated. And once a pattern looks intentional, it stops being a mistake. It becomes exposure. 2 days later, a letter finally came. But not a violation. A notice of temporary enforcement suspension. Fancy wording for we're backing off. At least publicly. Melissa signed it personally. Her signature looked rushed. Not the neat, confident script from before. This one slanted. Uneven. Pressure marks visible through the page. That's stress. I pinned it on my corkboard inside the barn, right next to the old violation letters. A timeline of arrogance. And cracks forming in it. But here's the thing about power structures. When they start losing control, they don't always retreat cleanly. Sometimes, they lash out. That evening, I noticed tire tracks near the far end of my south field. Close to the easement strip they love mentioning. Fresh tracks. Not mine. Too narrow for farm equipment. SUV tires. I followed them slowly. They stopped near the creek, where the old easement cuts across. No damage. But someone had clearly been walking the line. Measuring, maybe. Looking for leverage. That told me something important. Melissa wasn't done. She was searching for a different angle. The next morning, I got confirmation. Trevor again. They hired a private surveyor. Of course they did. If they couldn't win on compliance, they'd try boundary disputes. Classic escalation. Create doubt. Create conflict. Hope I slip. But I didn't slip. Because everything on this farm is documented. Original land maps. Handwritten survey notes from 1926. Even updated GPS overlays my lawyer helped me file last year. Preparation isn't loud. It's patient. 3 days later, the county officials returned. This time with more paperwork. More questions. And a different tone. Less neutral. More investigative. One of them asked directly, "Have you experienced repeated enforcement pressure beyond legal authority?" That's a powerful question. Because it shifts the narrative. From defense to victim of overreach. I answered honestly. Showed them every letter. Every fine. Every email Melissa sent. And when I showed them the video clip of the 6 cop cars, they exchanged a look. Not shocked, but concerned. Concerned is worse than shocked. Concerned means consequences are being calculated. That afternoon, word spread again through the subdivision. This time faster. Residents were asking for financial transparency. Asking how much money had been spent on legal enforcement attempts. Asking why 6 police vehicles were called for what turned out to be a civil matter. And once neighbors start asking questions publicly, board members start protecting themselves privately. Trevor told me one board member resigned quietly. Just sent an email and stepped down. Didn't even show up to the next meeting. That's not loyalty. That's survival instinct. Melissa, though. She doubled down. Scheduled a community stability address. That's what they called it. Stability. Like I was the earthquake. Flyers went up around the subdivision entrance. Residents only. No outsiders. Meaning no me. But here's what she forgot. Trevor is a resident. And Trevor was done staying quiet. The night of the address. I didn't go near the subdivision. I stayed on my porch, watching the sunset roll across land that still belonged to my family. But my phone stayed in my hand. Waiting. Around 8:32 p.m. Trevor sent one message. She's blaming you for falling property values. I laughed out loud. Falling property values. Because I didn't repaint my 100-year-old barn beige. That's desperation. Real desperation. But here's the twist. He followed with another message. People aren't buying it. That's when I leaned back in my chair. Slow breath. Because when fear turns inward, leadership fractures. And fractures spread. So now the HOA isn't just fighting me. They're fighting doubt inside their own neighborhood. And doubt is harder to silence than one stubborn farmer. So let me ask you this. If your HOA president started blaming one homeowner for the board's own legal mistakes, would you believe her? Or would you start asking questions too? What would you do if you lived in that subdivision? Tell me below. The night of Melissa's community stability address didn't end the way she planned. It cracked something open. Trevor called me when it was over. Didn't text this time. Called. His voice had that shaky energy. Like someone who just watched a train jump the tracks. She lost them, he said. Lost who? The room. Apparently Melissa stood at the front of the clubhouse. Lights bright. Board members lined up behind her like silent bodyguards. She blamed outside interference. Blamed misinformation. Blamed anti-HOA agitation. That would be me. But then someone asked the question she didn't want. How much did we spend trying to seize that farm? Silence. The kind that tightens throats. Another voice followed. Why were 6 police vehicles called? Another. Were we even allowed to do that? Trevor said Melissa tried to redirect. Talked about protecting property values. Talked about maintaining standards. But the tone had shifted. People weren't nodding anymore. They were calculating. And once homeowners start calculating, they start thinking about their own money. Their own risk. Their own exposure. That meeting ended early. No applause. No unity speech. Just scattered chairs and fast exits. The next morning, something new showed up in my mailbox. Not from the HOA. From a resident. No return name. Just a plain white envelope. Inside. Copies. HOA internal emails. Printed screenshots. Highlighted lines. My name all over them. Melissa had been pushing hard behind the scenes. Calling me non-compliant liability. Referring to my farm as visual contamination. Suggesting aggressive enforcement before he becomes a symbol. Before he becomes a symbol. That line stuck with me. Because it meant she understood something. This wasn't about paint. It was about control slipping. And symbols scare people who rely on control. There were other emails too. One from a board member warning her. We need to verify state authority before escalating. She replied. Delay will weaken our position. Proceed. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. I took photos of everything. Sent copies straight to my lawyer. And then I did something careful. I didn't post them. Not yet. Because timing matters. Exposure is strongest when the target thinks they're recovering. By afternoon, another board member resigned. Second one in a week. That's not coincidence. That's structural cracking. Trevor told me residents were forming a private group chat. Not to gossip, but to compare notes. Fine amounts. Threat letters. Lien warnings. Patterns were showing up. One elderly couple had been fined for a flag size violation. A single mom got daily penalties over lawn patches during a drought restriction. Small things, but stacked together. They didn't look small anymore. They looked systematic. And systematic pressure leaves paper trails. That afternoon, a local online blog published a short piece. HOA enforcement under state review after farm dispute. No drama. Just facts. But facts are louder than opinions when they're written down. The comments section exploded. Not just from my town. People from nearby counties chimed in, sharing similar stories. Melissa didn't post anything publicly, but she sent out a new HOA bulletin, claiming false narratives were circulating. That phrase alone told me she was rattled. False narratives don't need bulletins. Truth does. 2 days later, I noticed another car near the easement. Not a surveyor this time. Melissa herself. Standing there with a folder. Looking at the land like it betrayed her. I walked down calmly. Stopped a few yards away. She didn't smile this time. No gloss. No polish. Just frustration. You turned them against me, she said quietly. I shook my head. No, your emails did. Her eyes flicked up sharply. That hit. You don't know what it takes to run a community, she snapped. I know what it takes to respect boundaries, I answered. She looked exhausted. And for the first time. Not powerful. Just human. But human choices still have consequences. You could have just repainted the barn, she muttered. That sentence right there. That was the core of it. To her. Compliance meant obedience. Even when it wasn't lawful. Even when it wasn't right. And she couldn't understand why I wouldn't bend. Because she had built a system where bending was easier than fighting. But I wasn't raised to bend. She left without another word. No threats. No warnings. Just silence again. And silence from someone who used to send certified letters weekly. That's louder than shouting. By the weekend, residents officially requested a special vote of confidence. That's what Trevor told me. Meaning they wanted to vote on whether Melissa should remain president. That escalated fast. Because once leadership is questioned publicly, authority becomes fragile. And fragile authority makes desperate decisions. That night, I sat in my barn. Lights low. Looking at those printed emails again. Before he becomes a symbol. Funny thing about symbols. You don't choose to become one. People choose you when they're tired of being quiet. So now this isn't just about my 100-year-old farm. It's about whether fear keeps running that subdivision. Or whether doubt turns into change. And here's the part that's been on my mind. If Melissa loses that vote, she doesn't just lose power. She loses protection. Because once she's just another resident, the audit won't feel political anymore. It'll feel personal. So tell me something. If your HOA president tried to crush one homeowner, and the evidence showed it was intentional, would you vote them out? Or would you stay quiet to protect property values? What would you do if you lived there? Let me know below. The vote was scheduled for Saturday evening. 6 p.m. sharp. Subdivision clubhouse. Residents only. Trevor sent me a picture of the printed notice taped near the mailboxes. Emergency vote of confidence, HOA leadership review. No names. But everyone knew who it meant. The air felt different that day. Heavy. Like a storm building without clouds. I didn't go near the subdivision. Didn't need to. This wasn't my battlefield anymore. This was theirs. Around 5:40 p.m. Trevor texted. Packed house. 10 minutes later. Melissa looks calm. Too calm. I could picture it. Her standing at the front again. Blazer sharp. Hair perfect. Trying to project control. Because control is everything to someone like her. At 6:12 p.m. My phone buzzed again. They're reading the audit notice out loud. That surprised me. Apparently one resident stood up and read a summary of the state inquiry. Mentioned improper enforcement attempt. Mentioned possible financial review. Mentioned personal liability of board members if misconduct was confirmed. Personal liability. That phrase hits homeowners differently. It means your own money. Not HOA money. Yours. Trevor sent another message. She's blaming you again. Of course she was. When systems crack, they look for an external enemy. It's easier than admitting internal failure. But this time, according to Trevor, people weren't nodding. They were interrupting. Asking direct questions. Requesting documentation. Demanding financial transparency. One resident even asked how many total fines had been issued in the last 3 years. That's when things reportedly got tense. Because once numbers enter the room, emotion leaves. And facts start weighing things down. 6:47 p.m. They're voting. 3 simple words. And suddenly my porch felt smaller. The farm felt quieter. Even the wind slowed down. I didn't expect to feel nervous. But I did. Not because I needed her gone. But because I knew what it would mean if she stayed. If she survived this. She'd come back harder. Smarter. More careful. At 7:03 p.m. My phone rang. Trevor didn't speak for 2 seconds. Just breathed. Then. She lost. Simple. Direct. Over. The vote wasn't even close. That's what he told me. Residents were tired. Tired of fines. Tired of threats. Tired of feeling watched instead of supported. Melissa stepped down on the spot. Didn't fight the count. Didn't demand a recount. Just gathered her papers. Walked out. And left through the side door instead of the front. That detail mattered. Side exits are quiet. But they echo louder than front doors. By 8:00 p.m. the subdivision Facebook group was already buzzing. Some residents celebrating. Some nervous. Some worried about property values. But the majority seemed relieved. Relief spreads fast when pressure disappears. Sunday morning. I saw something I hadn't seen in years. 2 residents from the subdivision walking along the fence line near my field. Not measuring. Not inspecting. Just walking. One of them raised a hand when he saw me. Not a wave exactly. More like acknowledgement. That's new. Later that afternoon, I received an official email. Not from Melissa. From the interim HOA board. Short. Formal. Stating that all enforcement actions related to my property were suspended pending state review. And that the HOA intended to cooperate fully with the inquiry. Cooperate fully. That's language written by lawyers. Not ego. I read it twice. Then set my phone down. Walked out to the middle of my field. Just stood there. The barn behind me. The hills stretching out ahead. Wind moving through tall grass. My great-grandfather's land still intact. Still mine. Still free. But here's the twist. Winning doesn't feel loud. It feels steady. And steady is better than loud. By Tuesday, the state review expanded. That's what my lawyer told me. They weren't just looking at the farm enforcement anymore. They were reviewing the HOA's broader compliance practices. Financials included. That's when Trevor sent one final message that week. You didn't just defend your farm, you flipped the whole board. Maybe. But I didn't set out to flip anything. I set out to protect something. There's a difference. Power collapses when it forgets why it exists. HOAs are supposed to serve communities, not control them. And once residents remember that, presidents lose thrones fast. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, I noticed a moving truck parked outside Melissa's house in the distance. Boxes stacked near the driveway. No crowd. No goodbye speech. Just quiet unloading. Maybe she was relocating. Maybe just reorganizing. Hard to say. But the symbolism wasn't lost on me. She once tried to turn my land into a compliance lesson. Now her own house felt smaller. Less certain. And here's the thing about all of this. The state review isn't finished. It's just begun. And if they find what the emails suggest, there won't just be leadership change. There could be penalties, reimbursements, even structural reform. So now I'm standing here thinking about something bigger. If one stubborn farmer with a timer can expose overreach, how many other neighborhoods are one question away from doing the same? So let me ask you this. If your HOA president just lost a vote because one homeowner refused to back down, would you feel safer? Or would you worry about what the audit might uncover next? What do you think happens when the paperwork finally finishes? The state review didn't take weeks. It took months. And that's the thing about real consequences. They don't explode. They unfold. Slow. Detailed. Unavoidable. At first, the subdivision tried to move on. New interim president. Friendly emails about community healing. Promises of transparency. But audits don't care about fresh paint and softer language. They care about paper trails. And Melissa left a long one. 3 months after the vote. My lawyer called me early in the morning. Not casual. Not relaxed. Focused. The findings are in, he said. I stepped outside onto the porch. Wind moving across the pasture. Barn steady behind me. What did they find? Improper enforcement practices, procedural violations, unauthorized legal escalation. I stayed quiet. Let him continue. Your farm case triggered it, but they uncovered more. More. That word echoed. Over the next hour, the picture became clear. The HOA had issued multiple fines without proper statutory backing. Filed enforcement notices before confirming jurisdiction. And in at least 4 cases, threatened liens that were never legally valid. That's not just aggressive. That's reckless. The state required immediate corrective action. All improper fines voided. Reimbursement ordered for affected homeowners. Mandatory legal compliance training for the board. And here's the part that hit hardest. The enforcement attempt on my farm was officially classified as unlawful escalation under agricultural protection statutes. That classification carries weight. It means the 6 cop cars, the threats, the seizure motion, were never justified. Trevor called that evening. His voice sounded lighter than I'd ever heard it. They have to refund thousands, he said. People are stunned. Some residents were relieved. Some embarrassed. Some angry they didn't question things sooner. That's human nature. We trust systems. Until they fail loudly. Melissa wasn't at the follow-up meeting where the findings were read. She'd already listed her house. Not dramatic. No goodbye speech. Just quiet. Like someone closing a door behind them. I didn't celebrate. Didn't throw a party. Didn't even post online. Because this was never about humiliating someone. It was about boundaries. And boundaries held. A week later, I received a formal letter from the HOA. Not a threat. Not a warning. An apology. Carefully written. Legally reviewed. But still an apology. They acknowledged overreach. Acknowledged the protected status of my land. And confirmed no future enforcement actions would be attempted without verified jurisdiction. That's corporate language for. We learned the hard way. I folded that letter. Walked into the barn. And pinned it next to the old violation notices. Start. Conflict. Resolution. All on one corkboard. My great-grandfather probably never imagined HOA politics when he cleared this land. He worried about droughts. Livestock disease. Harsh winters. Not compliance committees. But every generation fights something different. And this was mine. A month later. Something unexpected happened. The new HOA board invited me to attend an open forum. Not as an enemy. As a speaker. They wanted to discuss agricultural boundaries. Community cooperation. Coexistence. That word surprised me. Coexistence. Because that's all this ever needed to be. Farm and suburb. Side by side. Without one trying to dominate the other. I went. Not to gloat. Not to lecture. Just to speak plainly. I told them the truth. I don't hate HOAs. I hate overreach. I don't hate rules. I hate rules applied without respect. The room was quiet. But it wasn't hostile. It felt reflective. Like people seeing the full picture for the first time. When I left that meeting, a few residents stopped me outside. Shook my hand. One older woman said, "Thank you for standing up. We didn't know how." That meant more than any legal ruling. Because sometimes the biggest victory isn't money. It's example. Back on the farm. Life settled into rhythm again. Tractor noise in the mornings. Sheep grazing near the creek. Barn standing red and proud against the hills. No beige in sight. The subdivision still exists. Lawns trimmed. Mailboxes aligned. But something changed over there. You can feel it. Less tension. Less fear. More conversation. And every now and then, a resident walks near the fence line and waves. Not awkward anymore. Just neighborly. The timer that day didn't just measure minutes. It measured a shift. From blind authority to accountable leadership. And here's the truth. If I had unlocked that gate, if I had repainted that barn, if I had just paid the fines to keep the peace, none of this would have happened. Sometimes peace isn't peace. It's surrender dressed up politely. But standing calm, standing firm, that changes things. So now I sit on this porch at sunset, looking over land that survived storms. developers, and 6 cop cars. Still standing. Still ours. And I keep thinking about one thing. How many other neighborhoods are one question away from accountability? If you were in my boots that day, would you have started the timer? Or would you have opened the gate? Tell me honestly. What would you have done?